So we just finished talking about asset management, and let's pivot a little bit into configuration management. But those two processes really are tightly coupled together, because when you're gaining evidence for supporting asset management, you're collecting a lot of the same information you would need for configuration management. So it's working with a lot of the same data, a lot of commercial and free tools that you would use in IT or security departments usually do asset and configuration management in one solution because they're so tightly coupled concepts. But the difference here is that configuration management, the ultimate goal of configuration management, is to be aware of changes in how devices are configured. And this is very important because there are instances in which administrators, whether they be a new hire onto the team who has elevated privileges, they might mess something up accidentally. Or what if we have an insider threat who changes a system for, ill-gotten attempts at doing something bad in the network? Or what if we updated 9 out of 10 systems but forgot to do the 10th one? If we didn't have good configuration management, we wouldn't know about that 10th system failing to meet the standards that we put in place for the other 9. So configuration management is very important to look for changes in how the devices are configured for the sake of ensuring that they're all in the same state. If I have a problem on one system and I fix it there, I know how to fix it on all the other systems because they're all exactly configured the same. I can identify if systems are not compliant with our configuration management policy. Every system should have this level of patching or vulnerability configuration or software deployment state. If a system is not adhering to that minimum level, well, we can quickly identify those systems and remediate. Last but not least, many times when an attacker gets in our network, they do change systems for their benefit. They will reconfigure machines to make them more vulnerable or easy to maintain their access. They want to maintain that access, and sometimes that might require a configuration change to that machine. So if we are doing good configuration management, that is one more layer to our defense in depth approach to detecting changes in configuration. If we're not monitoring this and the machine's compromised and it gets changed, we don't know. And that's not where we want to be. So again, NIST provides us another specification, 800-128, the Guide for Security-Focused Configuration Management of Information Systems. So we have another framework that allows us to create a security program that supports configuration management for our employer, or if we're doing a consulting engagement, we can assess how effective they are based on this standard specification. But essentially the goal here is planning. We need to know what systems must be within our configuration management policy. And then we go on to identifying and implementing configurations. Well, that can be a network appliance, that can be a computer, that can be a laptop, a printer, a mobile device. It could be anything, but we need to know what devices they are and how they are to be implemented. All printers will be configured to operate only from this network segment. They will all have these services disabled on them so the printers can't be compromised. All users' mobile devices will be configured with mobile device management so we can remotely wipe devices in case they are lost or stolen. So those are some examples of configurations that we would expect to put on these devices, and the configuration management program is essentially an enforcement. It is the technical and physical or policy-based controls around the state at which we expect our assets to be in at all times. And once we make a change in our configuration management process, we're now into the controlling configuration changes. As we need to make changes, we can specify the changes and immediately know of every device that is currently non-compliant. We can then begin building a remediation process from the most critical asset that needs fixes first to the least critical assets. And once we've got that rolling, we go back into this monitoring phase where we're again looking for changes to configuration state. So once this system is up and running, we shouldn't be surprised about new assets being added to the network and what configuration they may be in. And if they do deviate from what's expected, we can handle those problems. It takes a lot of work to get a program like this up and running, but once it's up and running, you have a repeatable process to handle these situations. More often than not, many organizations forego setting up these types of programs, and when they are compromised or breached, they are really three sheets to the wind, left out in the cold, because they do not have any process, they do not have any policy, they do not have any tools, technology, or methods to solve some of these essentially basic cyber hygiene problems that should be put in place to support a good incident response strategy. And that really just pivots into why cybersecurity costs so darn much. If you look online and you look up the average cost of cyber breaches, it easily goes into the high hundreds of thousands of dollars to millions of dollars very, very quickly. And this is for breaches even at small organizations. We're not talking big conglomerates. They spend into the hundreds of millions for really bad breaches. And it really boils down to they didn't have the fundamentals in place. They weren't tracking their assets. They weren't being aware of the configuration changes in the network. They weren't keeping systems up to date. They didn't restrict how those devices could communicate. They weren't tracking their users. All of these really fundamental things that we've talked about in the past, your basics for cyber hygiene, when they are all lacking, the cascading effect of not doing this right can make something that would be somewhat easily recoverable into downright nightmarish and the kind of stuff that makes it on the news. So it's worth putting in the hard work to building these programs because it pays dividends in the long run. I think I belabored some of these points pretty well in the discussion thus far, but again, asset tracking of critical assets and anything that isn't inherently critical is really, really important to our strategic planning and how we can respond to these assets. And it's worth noting again and bringing up, when we think about criticality of systems, my most critical assets in the organization, we want to protect those assets first and foremost. However, always remember that other assets, which seemingly aren't that risky to the business, can be used as launching points to bring down our critical assets. Oftentimes, those secondary, tertiary important systems are compromised and abused to go after our critical assets. So we always need to look at our problems from an adversary perspective to really understand our risk and how we can manage that risk accurately. And again, we can't do a good risk assessment if we don't have good asset tracking. Assets belonging to other business units is just a reality of larger organizations, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It can be an epic pain. Lots of business units do not care about security. They are not security technical IT people. They are business managers, sales folks, product owners. They care about a budget. They care about their bottom line. They care about their quarterly goals. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is what makes the business money. And that money is how the security and IT teams are paid. IT and security are supplemental to the business. We ensure that the business can manage its risk and operate. That is to say, we have to be good stewards of their assets, and we have to communicate with these business units about how security is helping them. Security should not slow down business units and make it harder for them to do their job. Oftentimes, they will feel that way because we're asking them to do things. Hey, you have to have 16-character passwords now. Nobody likes hearing that. But that's the reality of life. So, needless to say, technical skills are really good in the security field. Interpersonal skills, having good listening skills, and being pleasant with people gets you a lot further than knowing the best way to secure a system sometimes. Last but not least, asset and configuration management really coupled together, tied into a lot of the same data. We need the same types of information to assess risk and track our assets and understand configuration state. That is to say, we need the tools, we need the people, we need the processes, and ultimately this gives us that visibility. What's in our network? How is it configured? And what things do not meet our standards to be in this network? Let's get a list of those devices, rank accordingly to risk and criticality, and start working on those. Let's come up with a plan to solve that problem so that they are or are at a minimum level state to be in the network.